Good morning, everyone. Welcome to, or good afternoon, depending on where you are, our part 4 in our series on the Archibus Cloud launch, where we're going to talk about Archibus maintenance in the cloud. And I'm Peter Costanza with Imagineit. I'll be doing a brief introduction of the cloud model, what is included in maintenance, and then Greg from Archibus will be demonstrating for us. So pretty simple agenda for today. And again, we'll have time at the end for questions and answers if you have any questions. From an Archibus Cloud overview perspective, some of you who are here have seen several of these. Archibus has launched a cloud product last summer, and it's based on the core Archibus technology that's been around for the last 20 years. And basically, on top of the Archibus database, which is symbolized by that red dot below, Archibus put together something called Foundations. And Foundations I would call kind of keep it simple, stupid CAFM, which I like because I can explain, but it does very basic track your space, track your assets work, and track your maintenance. On top of that, though, there's several integrated modules which allow more functionality for that. So there's different areas. So you'll have a full function space management piece, which I believe we covered during the last section. There's a whole section covering assets and asset management. Today, we're going to focus on maintenance and operations. There is a module for reservations. And then through the merger with Archibus and SaraView, there is functionality to some higher level space planning tools inside of SaraView. So that's just a quick overview of Archibus Cloud for those of you who are new. In terms of today, we're just going to focus, on that maintenance and operations piece. Maintenance, I'd like to tell you, is rocket science, but, generally there are two types. There's on-demand maintenance and preventive maintenance. As we look at this, the real key, though, as you start to implement systems is to maximize your ROI on your maintenance, through pulling different metrics and things like that as you work through your process. From a value-add perspective, if you can optimize your maintenance, you can save money and increase, your bottom line. So the goal really is to increase efficiency. And outside of just tracking the different work orders and maintenance items and assets that you're watching, there's a lot of tools that come out that allow us to analyze time and costs and labor, so we can look to optimize resources. Does it make sense to have our work teams work differently? Does it make sense to possibly outsource updating the PMs on the HVAC equipment, for example, to a third-party contractor? And then the other thing you see that Greg will put a big focus on is Archibus has worked really hard to improve the end-user customer experience so that as things are getting fixed and maintained within the facilities, your internal clients are happy. And that's my kind of introduction for things overall, and I'll hand things over now to Greg, who will talk about things in detail.
So again, thank you everybody for joining today's session, and I'm glad you could participate in these monthly sessions we've been doing with the folks from Imagineit. So today we're going to focus on what Archibus can offer in terms of maintenance, and as Peter said, it's really divided between what you do on day-to-day corrective actions, break fix, and on-demand work, and then of course the more important preventive maintenance, making sure you do all the routine scheduled maintenance so that you maintain peak efficiency of your assets and properly manage your resources for using the system. The whole purpose, of course, is to help us manage, as facility managers, the status of work from the moment it's created all the way through to the completion cycle, and capturing the key essential data along the way to tell us who did the work, when it was done, what materials were used, and then help us determine the cost and the effectiveness of the group to complete the task. This has been, even to this day when I talk to people, been a challenge for folks who can barely know when work is done, and realistically to properly staff and resource, they need all of these extra details. Peter properly mentioned that, part of this is making sure that the employees that you service and support within your organization have a way of communicating directly with you. They don't need anything too complex, but they need a way of A, communicating what they need, and B, following along what is happening with the system. So we provide them with the ability to launch a request, and we allow for the fact that depending on what they're doing, whether they're at their desktop or they're walking around in the building or attending a meeting, they can use all optional devices. So they can use their desktop, as I said, or they can use their mobile phone, or they can use their tablet devices. And any one of those things gives easy access to creating the work. Of course, when all said and done, what we're trying to understand is how much work we're generating, creating, managing, and what's the effect on our resource pool, and are we able to handle the volume of work. If we've already planned for the preventive maintenance, we want to make sure that we're not overwhelmed by the addition of on-demand tickets, so that the resources, the staff that we have, can handle the full volume of work without falling behind and having to postpone or delay work in getting done, or have tickets get lost in the system. The benefit that it gives us, of course, is the more data that we capture, we can better understand the performance of the assets and actually review the history and know when it's time to make those decisions about replacing or doing major refurbishment of the assets in question. And at the same time, we can analyze how things are performing based on the different types of work, based on the staff resources that we have, based on the different buildings that we're occupying, seeing what it's costing us, what the operational details are, so that we can constantly monitor and improve our operation. And like I said before, realistically, what we want to do is set up our maintenance schedules, use the system to effectively know when it's time to maintain the assets in question. So define all those procedures, make sure those procedures are assigned to the appropriate assets in question, and then set up the schedules so that the system will generate the work and know when the work is completed, when it's time to generate the next task at hand. And not to overwhelm us with work if there's overlapping 3-month, 6-month, 12-month schedules. So that's kind of an overview of what you can get with the system. So let's take a look at some of the capabilities of the software. We'll start right again, like we've been doing these past few sessions, by going through the user experience. And so I've set it up to help us kind of monitor what's happening. We'll start with a very simple request process where we make it very easy for the employee to tell us the kind of problem that we have. All they need to do is input the simplest of details, in this case, change lights. They need to tell us where it is, and this is where we give them access to the data that we have so we can share the floor plans, and if they're in a meeting in one of the conference rooms, for instance, they can use that to immediately tell us the location of the work, fill in or take pictures if it's something like a coffee spill or broken item, and then attach that with a device and bring it into the system. They then can keep a running tally of the work that is going on, so they always are aware of what's happening with the tickets that they submit into the system. And meanwhile, the folks in the maintenance department will certainly be able to process the work as it comes in and manage the workflow that is set up for the different tasks that are assigned to the maintenance team. And as the system updates and makes the appropriate changes, the software will communicate back to the employee what the latest status is. So here we take that ticket that we just generated, we mark it approved in the system, and by doing that, it changes the status of the work from requested and based on the workflow automatically gets issued and set to be performed by the system. So here we're just going to look at that stage of the process. We can see the work ticket in hand. We know that it's been issued. And if we look at it from the point of view of the person, when they refresh their screen, they can see the change in status. So they know that it's in progress. And the same would happen once the work is completed. They would be notified that the work is completed, that it's been canceled, that it's been put on hold, whatever the status changes are. So in addition to getting an email, if that's your preferred mechanism of communication, they could have their own little homepage of their interactions with the facility organization. Now let's get into the heart of the people that have to do the work, and we'll start with the general maintenance and on-demand tickets. So again, there's a lot of different ways to manage the workflow, whether it's done by the supervisors, whether it's done by the technicians, whether it's done by using mobile technology to help us along with the process. There's many different options. I'm going to keep it simple this time and just focus on using the Ops console, just again to take a ticket that's been put in. To help us understand the volume of work, I'm just going to look at only the on-demand tickets and hide the preventive maintenance tasks that we have on hand right now. Again, we have created a different work order for another part of the facility. The workflow says I need to approve it, so let's go ahead and do that. And again, once it's approved, it automatically gets pushed over to the issued and in process. And now it is our job as facility managers, to update the details once the work is done. And so what we're going to do is we're going to track the work that was done by the technician by picking one of the techs or vendors that we work with and assigning them to the task. And we want to fill in, because again, we want to know when it was done and how long it took. So we'll fill in today's date and whatever time they got on the job. And again, did they finish it today? Did they finish it tomorrow? Did they finish it next week? We just want to know the duration of when it was within the system. And for simplicity's sake, we could use the mobile device and actually track the real time and stopwatch the time, but we're just going to say we spent 2.5 hours doing the work. Of course, by doing so, we'll also update what the cost of labor is. And to augment that, we also want to identify materials used. And for simplicity's sake, we're going to go through and do a massive change of all the light bulbs in the area because they all kind of went out at the same time. And we're going to say that we use 12 of them in this particular case. And so then we can see the cost of those things. So bottom line is we update the request. And our task now is very simple. We need to go ahead and complete. So we can grab that ticket and actually mark it completed. And it moves it and advances it to the next stage of the process. And just for a quick review, what we want to do is just remind ourselves of the data that we've collected. And, the important details we captured, of course, who were the people that did the work and what materials were used, how much did we spend in that. And as long as we don't expect any other details to happen, we can then go ahead and close the work order. And what does that mean? We're just going to archive it. It means we don't expect to add any details. More often than not, when working with customers, they may wait anywhere from 1 week to 4 weeks before they go through that final close process because there might be some additional information that's added later on in the process. Now, let's discuss how did we get there? How did we know what to do and what was going to happen? So we're going to look at what we call our service level agreements. These are the workflows that define what's going on, and these are what the people using the system will define for it. So we'll take a look at all the different types of electrical workflows that we have in the system. We can see we have some that are specific to outlets, power, light bulbs. I'm just going to do specifically the one for electrical for the building NC05 and look at and review what we would do typically to set up the details. And this is an interesting one because it says any type of electrical work pretty much follows the same process. So here we're specifically designating the building that we're working in. We could designate it to the person that we're doing. We could focus on a specific type of equipment or a specific type of department, but we try to keep it high level so we don't have to manage too many of them. We can see the rules around notifications and approvals that are immediately required and what happens along the way for managing. So we do all those settings of the various parameters so that we can get the work through to completion. And then the last thing we do is we just determine when are we going to execute this type of work. So we know it's a typical Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 work function. We save it and we've updated our work. So we can set up different workflows. that cover each and every building, each and every problem type, or each and every problem subtype. It's up to you to determine what makes the most sense, but at the end of the day, you want to manage it in a way that's most efficient so that in case you make any changes, they're easy to execute within the system. Now, as we advance through the process, there's a lot of data that we get to capture the information, so we want to be able to analyze those details. So let's take a look at what kind of information the system is reporting to us so we know what's going on. We have our performance metrics. The performance metrics are something that are defined in the software that allows you to turn them on and take full advantage of them. And from that, we can look at different results, and here we're breaking it down by problem type, letting us know how much different work we complete from one month to the next. And the same goes as what kind of requests are coming in from one month to the next, and what are the volume of work. So these are all metrics that can be summarized and very quickly let us know what's going on, and at the same time evaluate trends that are happening so that we can see if things are getting more efficient or if we're starting to get more problems coming up. So we always want to be aware of the alerts that the system's telling us working on. We also have this report console that allows us to quickly review different data. So here we're going to take a look at the different work teams that are assigned to the organization. And what we want to do is just get a sense of the amount of work that they're doing from an on-demand and preventive maintenance point of view. And when we drill down into here, we can see that we have a very high amount of PM going on. And when we need to know what that PM is, we ultimately can drill down and see all the work tickets that account for that work that was set up and scheduled for that particular period of time. So again, this gives us an idea of the work that we have to handle and make sure that our resources are able to fulfill the results. We talked about the maintenance of the assets, so we want to make sure that we can review that detail and make some decisions as to what is the next step. In this case, we can see we've actually sold this asset, which means we would have replaced it, and there's information here that tells us how much time was spent downtime, how much time was spent doing preventive maintenance and doing on-demand and corrective actions within the system, and what was the total cost of doing maintenance and repairs for the asset at hand. So there's a lot of details that we can use to make these kinds of decisions that help us determine when it's time to replace assets within the facility so that we're using our budgetary dollars for maintaining the facility at the most optimum that we can deal with in the system. So let's go back to our home page here and let's see what other kinds of reports that we have. One of those reports would be maybe the cost of completing work. So we have, in this particular case, we're looking at the beginning of the year and the work that we've completed and archived so far. So most of it's been electrical from the demos I've been doing. And we can see all of the work that was done, including the total cost that was accumulated for labor and materials and all the different locations that we had to execute the work in the system. And that the software would do the breakdown by the different types of problems, by the different months of the year, or by the buildings, by the departments, by the account. All of that is pretty straightforward for us to deal with. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So we also have access to the full applications. You've been seeing our home pages up until now. We have home pages for full access to all of the cloud capabilities. We have home pages for just doing the maintenance and operations, but we also have the full modules that you can access. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And here we're just going to use that as an opportunity to see how the preventive maintenance is set up. So we begin by taking a look at all the different PM procedures and steps that are done. We have some procedures that are overlapped, and if we look at the spot there, we can see that when we do a 6-month procedure, we suppress the 3 months. So the software is able to help us manage the volume of work that the system generates because there's overlapping similar work that's being requested. We can also make sure that we use the software to effectively assign the right procedures to the right assets, where you click on the asset and you assign the appropriate procedures to them, as we're doing here. So they now become part of the scheduling exercise that we have to do within the system, and we can do groups, set up. So if we put a whole building online and we have 12 air handlers, we can take all 12 and set them up at the same time. We don't have to do one at a time. And finally, what we want to do is understand the schedule that we set up, and pretty much the most important aspect of setting up the schedule is making sure that we identify when we're doing our first PM, tracking each time the PM updates, and letting the system generate when the next PM is going to be done. And every time we finish work, it automatically gets us ready for the next time work has to be scheduled. We can then also use the system to either manually generate tickets based on just running a report once a week, once a month, or we can set up a rule like I'm doing here, where we simply go in and say on the first of every month, or first Monday of every month, we're going to go ahead and run a PM procedure, so the system will auto-generate. Because there is so much PM work that has to be done, we do provide tools to help you better manage the work that is being executed by the facilities group. And so we have a full handle of what's going on. It can be organized in a lot of different ways. So by the different procedures to tell us what has been planned and is running late, and what's being planned to be executed real soon. We can organize down to maybe by different PM procedures and see what's going on. So there's different ways of looking at the data and helping us better manage and rebalance the workload so that we can effectively utilize our resources. So now that I have the PM procedure, what I'm going to do is take a look at the procedure for, I'm just waiting for the system to regenerate the whole page. The 1 month procedure, I can see that I have the ability to actually adjust the timeline. So here what I'm going to do is extend by a week a specific task. And what I want to do is save the change by resetting the date to execute by that one additional week. And once I've done that, I now have the ability to look at all of the schedules for all of the work that I have to do to make sure that my resources can properly handle the task at hand by rebalancing if there's a heavy volume of work that I have to deal with. So that takes us to the end of the session. It was pretty quick and pretty straightforward. So Peter, I'm going to let you jump back in here and take us to close.
So there'll be 2 more parts in this series. So next month we'll cover room reservations, and then in March we'll cover SARAView, space planning and optimization.